Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking, and a warm welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday. And it was a warm one, at least earlier on today. I got up incredibly late, and it was, my room was roasting. Which, yes, it is, designed that way, to retain the heat, but even still, it's like, the moment that you're out of adrenaline mode, all the systems come crashing back down, which probably explains the headache I've got right now. Although I have obviously, had something for some time, but I didn't allow myself to, to process it, let's say. But yeah, now of course, it's the time to process, well, everything that has happened, just as I said I would last week. Because, there's a lot to unpack regarding everything that happened and the recent failure that I have sustained. It's somewhat ironic, actually. The very remake that the very episode that originally we were split into two parts, so I could make the deadline, was the one that didn't make the deadline for the anniversary of the series. Which, that's why there hasn't been as much, fanfare this time around or anything, because I just simply was not around to coordinate it. And you might think, next time, ask someone to do that. Well, no, I mean, everyone's either all hands on deck, or because it wasn't just me that was struggling with what was going on. Although I did surprisingly learn a few things, but yeah, it was not just there was no other chance to communicate any of that until now, I guess. Because, it was, yes, of course, in the classic Jacob Butter fashion, there's always going to be technical errors and stuff when I least want them to happen. But it wasn't even just on my end. You know how the Musing Girl has a bunch of editors? Well, some of them were either away, had other commissions to do beforehand, or their laptops broke. It was a whole thing. I mean, Aiden finished his stuff well in advance, because he is quick like that. M's laptop broke, Quadzy had other commissions, and William, well, he finished his stuff and he was working on a different project which was supposed to also come out today, I think. So, look forward to that on his channel if you are so inclined. I forgot what he's renamed himself to at this point. He does not like to be reminded of his previous channel names, so I can't really say that there's any obvious similarities, let's say. I don't know. So of course, there was that mad dash, and not to mention also, while I was in the middle of doing my scene, the one that was the one that I've realized now why it took me so much longer, but I'll get to that in a moment, because the other scene, out of all the editors, remember I said that there was one scene that I wished Aiden had recommended to someone else, because he did not want to film it himself. And there was one that he then, I think, recommended something to William specifically. Like, oh well, that would have been perfect when he was on a roll and such. That was also a unique example of a scene that Aiden actually rejected, which are much rarer nowadays. There was a lot of them. I mean, even in his own material, that we co-write, obviously, where, you know, I start going into ambitious territory, and then he was like, well, you know, this is something for you, Jacob, specifically. I was like, well, I guess, you know, all for the sake of the story. But that happens less and less, partly, I guess, because Aiden doesn't really delegate as much of the, you know, production stuff as he used to, or really much at all. I think it's either because he's got more comfortable with that, or because, you know, he's learnt from the idea of trying to you know, manage other people, which is ironic because I started doing that because he offered to help with Mutant Girl in the first place, to help it come out faster, which then resulted in us, you know, giving Monet a trial run, and that dream team being put together, and then which afterwards then after Monet you know, resigned that position, opening up to several other people. So it's kind of interesting in that sense. But yeah, he didn't want to do specifically scene 2, the one that was one that took place in the boys' changing rooms, because he's not a fan of framed plots. Basically, that was the real reasoning behind it. But so yeah, that's so of course what happened was I then put my, you know, regular scene on hold to then rapidly film that one, and then obviously edit it and put it together, which, you know, pushed back everything, you know, ironically enough, by a day. So yeah, I think it was really that incident that threw my rhythm, you know, out of itself. I just said rhythm twice. You can tell I'm still tired, can't you? But yeah, that's that was the issue. Because yeah, yes, I knew that I was doing deliberately. I assigned myself the longest scene in a video which is a collection of very short scenes aside from that one, which is you know, but the reason I did that is because, like I said before, that original version, the one that was just simply labeled as 8 Part 2, was the one that I failed to you know, get out back in 2019, and I wanted to make sure that it was make sure that I could prove that you know, it was the ultimate sign of how much I myself had evolved. One thing I didn't consider until I was actually editing it was because this is around when I realized that I would need like so many different layers for every single thing, partly because of the way that I changed the filming methods for it, which I'll get to in a second. I realized that, I can split this up into you know, multiple different mini segments. And I realized that, yeah, that's what I could have delegated. What I really wanted to do myself, I guess, was the big fight at the end, and I guess, you know, the traps that were poorly conveyed originally. Aside from that, I didn't really need to. I now looking at it, I would have been fine with other people taking the reins on those particular parts. And I'm realizing this is a downhill path, and I'm... Oh wait, no, never mind. It's forks this way. I don't really fancy doing anything with hills today. So yeah, as for the filming method, I'll probably talk about this more because I'm going to do the creator commentary tonight. Normally we do that as part of the anniversary itself, but yeah, obviously things happened. So I'm going to do that as like regular, you know, stream time. and talk about this more in detail. But yeah, but for this year I tested out a method that maybe could be considered more efficient in the right circumstances. Because this is where I slightly, I guess I once again misunderstood what Bon was suggesting that I do. Because, you know, last year, I did the editing streams, you know, he pointed out that the fact that I was, you know, filming all the different characters individually in the home mode of Gacha Life 2 rather than the studio mode. This is the part people are going to click off because I start getting very technical. Yeah, so so that there are a few reasons that I was doing that originally, but what he suggested was that I go back to the method I used, ironically enough, during the original days, which was you know, obviously filming everything, you know, in the on one single green screen, which is something I started doing actually during the original. Sorry?
Can I say hi to the camera?
Oh, absolutely. Hello.
Are you posting this?
Yes, I am.
On what?
On YouTube.
Okay, what's your YouTube called?
Jacob Butter.
Jacob_Butter.
No, just Jacob space Butter.
Oh, I'm a subscriber now.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm not sure.
And you. There you go. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so I will say that's probably, you know, not a method I recommend on a grand scale, by the way, everyone, because you know, if they don't like my content, they're not going to continue to watch it. So that's the risk when it comes to subscribers en masse. Just to let everyone know. Back to, you know, the main thing that you know, gets people to subscribe, I guess. Yeah, I've lost my rhythm now. Yeah, it's the head again. It's the problem with not editing these videos. Well, I was talking about editing, so that's that. Oh yes, editing. So yeah, like that method. Like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You know, from a certain point of view, because, you know, a lot of what I end up doing is going through the script multiple times. You know, to clock in different characters' reactions and such, because acting is reacting, and you know, trying to figure out what's going on from there. And to be fair, the fight scene itself, because I didn't want it to be like, you know, choreographed like an action sequence, basically. I want it to be, you know, a very close combat, you know, where there was you know, not much technique associated with it, because neither one of them are particularly, you know, none of them are trained in any form of fighting. So of course they're just going to be, you know, doing essentially street fighting. But even street fighting has technique behind it. So yeah, no, they're just there, you know, wailing on each other, essentially. So yeah, that's so actually having them on the same plane where I can determine how their choreography was supposed to go was beneficial. Not that I couldn't have done it the other way. I absolutely could, and arguably, you know, the layering would have been far easier in that respect. But, you know, it's when you're considering efficiency, yeah, it works that way. So so yeah, it did help me out, and also you know, and also the other scene that I did, because, you know, the changing rooms while that is an original Gacha Life 1 background and therefore not in Gacha Life 2 for some reason, yeah, that was all done on one particular green screen with varying levels of masking around the characters that originally did not require as much. So actually, I think that method works more so when you have direct access to the backgrounds and don't need to green screen everything, which was the case in the original, obviously, because this episode was the one where I started to use custom backgrounds that were outside of Gacha itself. Ironically enough, the ones that I couldn't find again for this one, because before I started using FreePic and could encounter them easily, they're somewhere out there on one of my old hard drives, or I don't know, something. Hard to say, really. Maybe I could have gone through some old files or something, in OneDrive or whatnot. Which actually, now that I think about it, OneDrive might have been partly responsible for what happened. Because now that I think about it, as soon as I activated OneDrive to get some of the footage I needed, I actually, that's when my technical issues really started. So, if you cast your minds back to 2021, the end of it, that was when I was trying to get out season 2, the finale, and I spent 10 days trying to render out parts of individual scenes with multiple layers, which, yes, before I had a computer with an NVIDIA GPU, which should have helped in this matter. But yeah, the more layers and the more Vegas projects I needed, the worse it got. Because there are, again, like I said, some distinct advantages to filming in the home mode versus the studio mode. In the home mode, all characters are exactly centered by default, which means that you can put on the mouths, you can put them in you can alter their positions, you can do whatever, basically, and then work out in post-production exactly where they're supposed to go. You can also make sure that any masking that you do on a duplicate layer is exactly where they are at all times. Although I will say that that still works if you do the keyframing first and then make the mask layer, which I still had to do frame by frame, because that's partly one thing that Bond said he was holding his tongue on this year in the editing streams, because yeah, that part, masking still requires frame by frame or screen captures, because I could render them out in green screen and then do the mask layering that way. But I realized that if I wanted them to move at all anyway in the scene itself, that would negate everything. I had to film it on an actual green screen background and then put it in on top of the other thing. So I realized, just put them in the background. I tried that this year, but it didn't work. So yeah, that's one thing that I decided to not do. Although it did mean I could have multiple characters running, at the same time and interacting with each other in certain scenes, because you know that I like when characters walk and talk, which is another thing that's easier in home mode versus studio mode. Yeah, so so that method, of course, the thing is that because certain characters go either like above or below or whatever and actually move in the scene, those then had to be separated into different layers, which then had to be in turn sometimes duplicated if one of them had green layering or something. And I know that people have suggested like using purple screen or something, but that is what I attempted to do back in 2019. It didn't work as well. I stick to green because I know I can do the masking under normal circumstances, and if my computer decides to slow down and almost crash for basically the last 3 days on end, I would have been fine with doing it that way. Because like I said, masking is relaxing under normal circumstances. you know, when the deadline's looming and your computer does not let you, you know, starts to freeze every time you try to move the mouse ever so slightly, that's when it becomes stressful. So I will maintain that, you know, my computer slowing down to the degree that it did, because again of the multiple layers that I had, was what led to the ultimate downfall, basically. But yeah, even after that, because Aiden came back from his vacation, and you know, he was already asking me, oh well, you know, what how's the video going, because he hadn't realized that I just basically, like, you know, shut everyone out while I was working, which includes real life as well. I do have to extend an apology to my parents for having to once again put up with me isolating myself and just basically trying not to panic over the slightest distractions in the day. So I am sorry about that. But yeah, and to everyone else who was you know, behind the scenes and even managed to get their stuff in you know, right before, just to let you know, I actually didn't get to see most of that stuff until much later on. Aiden himself pointed out something that I missed when it came to looking at a specific video, a specific scene, but that will that will come about, you know, again in the commentary tonight. But yeah, in general, I think that was kind of it. Like I said before, regardless of whatever happened, the end product was going to look better than the original, and it does. Oh, sorry, yeah, what I was saying before about Aiden coming back from vacation. He then, because this was, you know, around the time I was really getting into, okay, I'm not going to be able to finish this in time and go back and look at the rest of it. That's why there's no fan art segment this time, or no last time on the Music Girl or anything like I normally do. I just didn't have the time, or at the time, processing power to actually make it work. Part of it also is because, again, I render everything in 4K to make sure that, you know, I follow Quadsy's old advice of getting, you know, everything as crystal clear as possible. Because I was talking to Everly about this, you know, where I said that, you know, like the old advice that I got from way back in the day before I even started, you know, started to join the Gacha community. You know, it was like 2017, 2018 maybe, where one of my classmates actually said that the purpose of good lighting, referring to stage, by the way, is to not let people know it's there. And again, something that Monet told me was that, you know, one thing that's making the Mutant Girls seem a bit more archaic than it was before, this is before Gut Type 2 came out, by the way, was the fact that there was most of the really popular gacha series are the ones where people have either moved to tweening, or they have like really like made a distinct visual evolution, or they were trying, like, you know, insane editing techniques, or, you know, things of that nature. And you know, meanwhile, I was still I had somewhat stagnated, which was, you know, obviously when Music Girl came out, it was one of the only voice acted projects in Gacha, and I should have marketed it accordingly. But I didn't because, well, I've talked about that story before. Yeah, Yeah. What was the next thing? What was I thinking? Yeah, so, well, what was I thinking, but also what was I saying right now? But yeah, like, I thought to myself, because I was talking to Everly about that story on editing stream, and I realized that, yeah, like I said before, my editing style, I knew this before, was mostly revolving around that old piece of advice, the one that I got about lighting. That, you know, the best editing is the type of editing that you don't notice, or at least for me, unless you're obviously in Gacha Review in laser focus mode, trying to, you know, pick out minor details or flaws or something, or minor details of good bits, depending on the episode in question and what series you're talking about. But you know, so yeah, they but I thought, like, okay, why that method? You know, because I do like to, you know, sometimes draw attention to things that I do. You know, back when my favorite thing I was doing was the split screen that I used to do ad nauseum in in editing. It made me feel very fancy at the time. But yeah, masking is definitely, you know, is a case of, okay, well, you're supposed to not notice that something is wrong if it's done correctly. But yeah, things like that, where it's like, okay, well, all these things that I'm doing, and I realize that ties into, you know, the home mode versus studio mode thing and everything, and just how I make these videos in general. Because there's two things about that I've realized why I go with that methoding style. One, as I said to Everly, was because if I didn't do these things, you'd notice that something was wrong. If I didn't duplicate layers and mask around the people who were in green screen, or whichever screen I happened to try to use at the time, because, like I said, it doesn't always work out. I tried to red screen Pete, and that's the reason I discovered masking in the first place. It failed. Yeah, then when you try that way, the reason I do that is because if not, you would notice, even to this day, the difference in how the characters were colored, like the difference in in Pete's eyes, for example, which is the reason I did the green screen for him originally, and then tried to switch, and then it failed. It's now easier to green screen his eyes than it is to red screen his torso, by the way, for example. And before it says I can't purple screen because of his hair. So again, worked it out. But yeah, if I didn't do those things, you would notice, like, oh, his eyes changed, because a lot of that happens in well, the original, and even Fallen Angels and things that I'm responsible for, etc., etc. You know, it's always been an issue from Vegas specifically, based on how it does chroma key compared to other softwares. So that's one thing. But also, because, again, I've tried to keep everything as the same as possible. I could have made the characters change clothes if I'd, you know, and partly the fact is that, you know, I did make sure to have the boys in that scene, in that scene actually start to get changed. Nothing gets shown, obviously, because I have standards, but you know, like obviously Judas's tie and jacket, gone for some time. And part of that's an excuse to not deal with the green that they were. What was I thinking? Yeah, because also Judas, by the way, because again, if I want the same backgrounds, because, you know, making people all consistent, I have to make sure that he is masked at basically all times that he's on screen. Compared to before, when the backgrounds existed in the same app as him, and it was much easier that way. It's also probably why the videos take much longer now, because honestly, that's again, brings back to reason 2, is because I'm keeping everything as consistent as I possibly can. Well, partly because it's a remake, so obviously I'm trying to remake something better than I could before. But for continuity's sake, but also because with the Mutant Girl, aside from the discrepancies between editing styles of other people, which I can't really control. Like, I always want them to, you know, flow consistently. You notice, like, in some shows that have been running for a long time, their first seasons have a different quality of animation. Like in Rick and Morty, for example, the first season looks very different to the subsequent ones, and even the intro, they still use like the old footage, and you can tell there's a difference between how they were animated. SpongeBob, going back way earlier, obviously, the first season of that was done with cell animation, compared to every season since then with computers, and it looks very, very different. I'm gonna go down here. So, of course, to some extent, you're going to see that. You're going to see the evolution behind it. With the remakes, you still see the evolution, but I'm sorry, I'm going in circles about like what I want to say. The main thing is that, you know, it feels like the same show. Because with Mutant Girl specifically, like, yeah, like going back even to what Monet was saying about like evolving and stuff, every time I made a new gacha series, I always try to do something and push things further. You know, Alpha Witch Academy added noses, different style of outlining, and yeah, that was basically the changes there. Honestly, there was not that much. Although I was making use of the Gacha Club props a lot more in that one, but again, I do that with other stuff anyway. I mean, even with the PNGs that I do for Missions of Occulta, you know, not technically, you know, not a gacha series by definition because it's D&D, but it's still something where it's still something where I'm trying to see like what I can do to push things further, even if it's just the designs of the characters. And obviously with People Above, I want to see what Gacha Life 2 could do. At the time, not that much, but you know, that was the attempt. That was the plan. And with Mutant Girl, because it's lasted longer than the game it was made from and the game that replaced that game that it was made in. I've resisted altering the designs more than I had to. If you notice when it jumps to Gacha Club because of the switch between different clothing assets that were there more when his outfit changes. But aside from a few things like that, I try my best, you know, to make them look the same. Which basically means that everything that I have evolved to do, well, not everything, but a lot of things I've evolved to do in the musical specifically, but it bleeds into my other gacha content, is making the videos look like they used to. All the things that came easily before, animated mouths, you know, those exact same backgrounds, not having a chroma key issues everywhere, you know, come from the time when, you know, gacha had those other backgrounds be more available. And as I went through looking for park backgrounds, even on FreePic, I couldn't find stuff that felt like it like led into each other that much. But with gacha, because they selected the backgrounds so that they would actually follow a consistent pattern, some of them, not all of them, a lot of those backgrounds I just used again. My plan originally was to create a full new park if I'd had the time. You know, maybe play around with some of those, you know, with the custom background creation techniques I picked up from Gacha Review. Most of which are for indoors, so that doesn't work, but, you know, maybe if I'd had more time with the changing room scene, I could have attempted that, but no, it's, in any case, what was I thinking? Yeah, so basically that's why, you know, the mouths are put on where they would normally, because they want to still keep the animated mouths, and evolved into Gacha Life 2. I want the option of those of the custom poses, even the walks, even the running cycles or walk cycles that were, you know, kept from the animated poses when we was at Gacha Club, and then afterwards the ones that Bon made that were much more precise. You know, I've kept those, but I've also changed them so that they would have, you know, different things people could do during those pose moments, basically. Which, yeah, that means that I've basically been evolving to make improved versions of the old style that isn't as viable as it used to be, because of, you know, outside factors like the stuff that doesn't get converted from one game to the next, which seems to be a repeated thing. Again, this is not all on Gacha Life 2, because Gacha Club had something similar to that for me specifically. I still maintain that what every game has that is new compensates for some of the loss of the old. Not all of it, some of it. I've now officially run out of slots for new character poses, because I've had to make so many customized ones on account of copy-pasting all of the Gacha Club poses that I was accustomed to prior to the change. Which again, another thing that I did, you know, there was someone on YouTube who made a document, you know, with those different custom poses, basically, and well, the custom pose versions of all the Gacha Club poses, and I've been using those ever since. So, yeah, again, and I guess that's the thing. So the end result is that the videos look like the old ones, and to the untrained eye probably resemble them much more, because I'm trying to maintain the illusion that I am not doing the editing techniques that I have evolved to do. And all of that, of course, takes up a lot of time and is antithetical to trying to, you know, basically improve what you've already got, you know, by saying like, okay, this is what I should have done originally. But that's really the compensation was the time that it took. And while I could have, because I asked Aiden, circling back to Musical, to that actual episode, when he came back, I asked him to score and apply a few sound effects and such to the rest of the video, the part that was originally 8 part 1, because I was physically incapable of checking the rest of it until I finished 8 part 2 and could clear my computer of layers of Vegas content. So yeah, he did that, and I couldn't check it beforehand. And he did make a he did compile all of my individual scenes once I got to crunch time, and my laptop basically just shut down. I couldn't use it. I had uploaded a few bits, well, I uploaded the other bits onto YouTube beforehand, because I had those scenes rendered separately, again in 4K. I was also worried because the scene that Aiden rendered this time is by far the most pixelated scene in the entire episode. I don't know what happened, but the scene that what he brought back was, you know, pretty good. So I don't know, I guess it must have been his recording settings rather than his filming ones. Again, I'll probably talk to him about that during the commentary tonight. But yeah, like even without being able to see that, basically. And even though I could have just, you know, not looked it over, compiled just the version that he gave me, you know, maybe added a couple of sound effects here and there. It's very sound effect light, this episode, by the way, for many reasons. And I could have just posted that, basically, because, you know, I'd already asked M for a thumbnail. Aiden himself made a different one later on, so it's currently doing the classic YouTube A/B testing thing. Yeah. I could have done that, but then I was like, wait a minute. What the heck am I doing? I can't do that. The whole reason that the original episode 8 is split into 2 parts is because like I rushed out both of them. The original one just so I could like have what it was, you know, the original cliffhanger of that, but also that one so that I could get it done within October and focus on episode 9 in November, which may or may not have bled into the fact there's no rehearsal montage or anything in that episode. I don't remember. That's one thing that Aiden has commented on. And also, I agreed to make these remakes with Aiden in the first place because there are some bits in season 1 that do haunt me when I see them. Like 8 Part 2 original, which I still think is the worst episode that I have made of the entire show. Because it was so rushed, because there's stuff where I left in parts that said footage required by mistake, which are placeholder things in the editing that I thought I removed entirely, but I didn't. Because the you know, the green screening of the actual props was terrible because I wasn't using an art program yet, so I had very limited resources to actually use outside of Gacha itself. Because, you know, they just kind of gloss over the different tracks because I didn't have the effects required to put them together. And to be clear, if I'd had more time, I would have done way more with this episode. But that's not really, you know, that wasn't on the card. That's not really the point of this. You know, it's not the best it could have been, but it is better. And I wanted to make sure that it looked and sounded better than it did originally. And to that end, I succeeded. So that, the technical side of things, and all that was why I also I still thought I lost the file for the editing project, so I nearly had a minor fainting spell as that happened. I just mislabeled the file, by the way. I found a way to get around it. But yeah, all of that, I sacrificed the deadline because, you know, I was into a corner where I was like, okay, do I just repeat the sins of the past? Do I betray the very reason that I started the remakes in the first place, all for the sake of holding on to an arbitrary deadline that I set for myself that also resulted in, you know, the same stress and crunch time that I was avoiding by removing that from season 2. There is an irony that most of the stuff that I produced in the last 3 years worth of gacha content is because deadlines were looming. Not all, but some, but most of it. So it does get results out in some kind of fashion. It just leads to either me being unhappy with results or having to compromise on, you know, actually checking the sources, doing the scoring and sound effects myself, which I normally take pride in putting together, actually doing the camera angles, all of which Aiden covered, you know, mostly expertly. So I will commend him on that. So I have probably possibly learned to relax on that particular aspect of things. Maybe I'll see if the editors from now on will be willing to send in an angled version or no angled version, just in case I decide to change things around again. Don't know. I'll run that one by the team and see what happens. Maybe not M, because her method doesn't really is not conducive to angles, so it doesn't really apply. But yeah, to the rest of them. But yeah, that's what that. So you know, it was out basically as soon as it possibly could be, and ironically enough, my computer kicked into gear again for a brief while, just in order for me to render a 1080p version of it in a timely fashion, so I could actually check everything on there, which is why the credits are wrong. But yeah, aside from that, you know, everything else basically worked out. I gotta put the actual credits in the description after this, and then probably take a nap, have a bath, just generally take care of myself like I've not been doing for the past week. Because yeah, deadlines are great for putting stuff out, but you know, when this is the end result, you see why I stopped that. And also because, you know, the original season 1, you know, like all those episodes did have deadlines for them, so who knows what I could have done if I was a bit more relaxed on myself and decided to not, you know, force out the finale by the end of the year, which is the other time I had, you know, part 1 and part 2 to something. Episode 10 is going to be quite something. I'm glad I've only got 2 of these remakes left, and then I'm not going to remake season 2, you know. so yeah, and then after that we'll go from there. We'll see what happens. But yeah, for any other reason, I guess I hope it turned out okay. You know, discrepancies aside and everything. A lot of the stuff is obviously from my perspective. I'm happy with 8 Part 2. I feel I consider myself redeemed on the editing side of things, and if anything, it's taught me that lesson of you know, when it comes down to it, you know, don't compromise the truly important aspect of making the video. And now I'll focus on the important aspect of you know, being a live person. So with that, I guess we'll sign off from here. Let me know what you thought of the actual episode itself, or if you were those 2 boys that I found that were just in the park just now. You know, let me know if you want to know what the heck I'm talking about. It's the previous video uploaded on here, so it won't be too hard to find. Hope you like Gacha, and for the rest of you, you know, I'm sorry again for shutting you all out. I do hope that at least those means are justified by the end. And with that, please leave a like or dislike, because your opinion matters, as I've done so already. And on that note, until next time, good night.